Hello, a very warm welcome and a very, very special guest in the studio live this evening at Sheffield Live TV. I think I'll introduce that special guest first off. It is the first and the oldest trophy in football, and it originates here in Sheffield. A very warm welcome to the Youdan Cup. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio, sir, this evening, live as we are, and also, last but not least, the man who's brought the trophy in, and he'll be familiar to many lovers of non-league football, particularly those who, the increasing numbers, who inhabit the oldest football ground in the world at Sandygate. He is the former long-time chairman of Hallam FC, currently the commercial manager.
Correct.
Steve Basford.
That's it.
It's good to see you, Steve.
And you, Alan, as well. Thanks for having me, yeah.
No, it's a pleasure.
Or us.
And thank you for bringing the treasure into the studio.
You're welcome.
And obviously we've got a few beefy guys.
The security guys are
the other side of the camera there.
Absolutely.
And there's a security van outside, so we're taking no chances this evening. But there's a very special. People know, have heard of this trophy, but not as many people as should have heard of this trophy. The Youdan Cup dates back to 1867. And it was presented then. Hallam FC were the winners of that tournament, and therefore it's in their possession. But the special reason why you've dusted it down and it's gleaming there in the studio is that there's a special event this Friday, tomorrow.
There is.
To value it for the second time. Yeah,
so we have an auction company and valuation company up tomorrow. Can I say what they are?
Oh, of course, absolutely.
So that's Graham Budd Auctions, who specialise in sports auctions. A very good friend of ours, John Garrett, of Sheffield United fame, is working with them now. And we'll be holding more or less a full day at the ground tomorrow. Anybody can come along, bring memorabilia along if you want it valuing. There's some very fairly important items on the list already. Tony Curry's going to bring some of his stuff, so if you want to know how much something's worth that you've got, bring it along, bars open. And the sort of grand finale will be the third and most up-to-date valuation of the Youdan. Yeah, this starts at 5 p.m. at the 1860 clubhouse, or the bar, 1860 bar at Hallam. Fascinating. I know Tony Curry, originally I was going to do a programme about this a few weeks ago, which we couldn't do, and Tony Curry was going to appear on it. And he told me that he was going to bring one or two items. I gather that people would bring football programmes, for instance, historic football programmes of valuation, we hope so.
etc.
Yeah. And obviously anything. You know, the medals.
Shirts that have been signed by players, etc.
That's it, yeah. I mean, it's just amazing what people have got tucked away, isn't it?
It is. Well, you've got that tucked away, and you've had it tucked away for a long, long time now. You mentioned the auctioneers, Graham Budd. I think it's David Convery with John Garrett, who will be officially valuing that. So we're kind of thinking, because the first valuation was some years ago, and it was... on TV, it was the Antiques Roadshow on the BBC? It was the
Antiques Roadshow when it was at Chatsworth. And the trophy, I believe at the time, just before my time, we'd actually loaned to the V&A. So they took the Youdan along with another couple of trophies, I believe, along to Chatsworth, and it was valued then £20,000, which was... the chap who did it was the same chap that did the one previously, didn't know the provenance. So he valued it as a silver claret jug, £20,000. Right. So then it followed that it came back up to Derby, and we thought it was about time we took it again. Yeah, which is a very different story.
It was, wasn't it? 5 times as much, wasn't it? 100,000?
Yeah, so the guy admitted that he didn't know...
Alistair Dickinson.
Alistair Dickinson, that's the chap. So he said, well, now I realise the prominence of it. And we kind of didn't know at the time, but if you're an Antiques Roadshow fan like I certainly am, it got to the end of the programme, we knew it was on, it got to the end of the programme, it hadn't been on. So you know that they always save the best for last, don't they? And that's exactly what it was. And he said, I would now change the valuation to a minimum of £100,000. Right. Wow. But that, we think, is about 10 years ago. Might be something like that.
Yeah. Well, going to the history of the Youdan Cup and how it was played out, going back, and in fact, the interesting character Thomas Youdan, who actually paid for that trophy, had it made. But before we do, what are your? I mean, can I ask you what your expectations are of the valuation when it's valued tomorrow?
Well, it won't be a surprise to me if there are some notes added to the 100,000. You know, I mean.
Yeah.
Well,
that means £1 million. If you add a naught to £100,000,
who knows?
My math says that's £1 million, isn't it?
It's all about who wants it, isn't it? Yeah. But the main thing to stress here is, of course, that is not in the issue. That it's purely at this moment in time that it needs to be revalued for insurance purposes. So when it was valued at £100,000, the first thing that happened was we couldn't keep it anymore. So we got in touch with Sheffield United, who have the Legends Museum, and they very kindly said, yes, we can have it down here. It's part of their Legends tour now if you do that. And obviously it is an integral part of the history of football in Sheffield, being the oldest trophy kind of thing. So we couldn't keep it there, obviously. But it is, for us, it's the crown jewels of the history of Sheffield football, along with Sheffield FC, obviously, and Hallam and Sandygate. You know the Home of Football project that I've been involved with, and you've been to many of those. So it's purely, you need to know these things. You need to know how much something's worth, first of all, for the insurance. Yeah. So we might all, have a sharp intake of breath if it is.
And your insurance premiums are going to go up.
Well, they do it. They do it.
Right.
Fortunately, Sheffield United do it, because our insurance company, after the last one, just went, no, can't do that.
Now, John Garrett is very loyal to Sheffield United.
He certainly is, yeah.
He better value it at only at £100,000 then.
Yeah, it is. I mean,
the
it can be, double-edged sword, can't it? The valuation.
Is there a figure at which eyes would pop, and your committee, obviously you're not the chairman now, but where eyes would pop out? Should we?
I personally don't think so. I don't think there is a figure. I think it's part of its history of Hallam FC, its history of Sheffield football. Certainly, for me, no. It's there for perpetuity, and
as far as you're concerned, it's priceless.
I think so. I think so, and when something's considered priceless, then it has to be treasured like that. And for Sheffield to treasure this as we do the history of football in this city, how could you take that away? I mean, I have no idea what the figure's going to be. I really don't, and I just hope that people, it brings something to the fore of how important Sheffield is to the history of football. We've discussed it many times, how many things started here.
It feels like flogging a dead horse, to be honest, at times.
Yeah, I mean, we lost a very good member of our team, Sheffield Home of Football, Anne Murphy, who was a massive driving force. How we're going to manage without her, I don't know, but we owe it to Anne to keep going and drive the Home of Football forward. We keep going. Terry Fox is on board with the council. We've all had, many discussions about what we need to do.
And in the memory of Martin Westby, who did an awful lot of research and history of
all the stuff that I brought along here tonight. That you're going to be fascinated to read. A lot of this is Martin's work, and we got a chance to say a proper goodbye to Martin before Christmas. But honestly, can't explain how integral this city is to football as it's played today.
Yeah, it can't get more integral than that. In fact, I'm told, I think I'm right in saying that that trophy there that sits proudly in this studio, and we're honoured to have it here, by the way, predates the FA Cup, I think, by four years.
Yes, so 1867, and the FA Cup is 1870?
1870 or 1871?
71, something like
that. We did a bit of maths before, and it took us about 5 minutes to work out. It's 156 years old.
We've just done the maths on
it. It was, my maths is not my strong point, but unless I'm doing expenses. But Thomas Youdan and the origin of that trophy, how did that come into being?
So Thomas Youdan was a local theatre owner, entrepreneur. that was born in a place called Streetthorpe, on the outskirts of Doncaster. 9th of 10 children, farm labourers. So when he came along, he came into the city, I think, to begin a silversmith apprenticeship, and very quickly became a local businessman. Had the Surrey Theatre on Surrey Street, and got himself in all sorts of tangles with things that you should do and shouldn't do with licensing and stuff. So he was a proper character. But I mean, the Surrey Theatre had the theatre, had a concert hall, even a menagerie. You know, believe that?
Yeah.
You know, in the 1800s, and a ballroom as well. So he knew about promotion. So obviously football was in its birthdays then, kind of thing. So there were 12 teams in Sheffield, and we think, from what I've read from the research, that one of the committee of the local Sheffield clubs decided that a tournament would be a great idea, and went to him, much as people do now, as commercial manager, I do now, go along and say, how about sponsoring this? Yeah. And I think he was just all over it. Bear in mind, he was an entrepreneur, so he knew that football was getting very popular. And you know what? If I put my name on this, I think it'd be really good. Obviously put the trophies up. So it wasn't only this, there was a second and third place trophy as well.
Do they exist anywhere?
That would be interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah. So as it went with the tournament of 12, it became down to the last three, and that was played as a round robin. And Hallam and I'll check the notes. Hallam and I think it was Norfolk. Yeah. Played in the final at Bramall Lane. Yes.
And there's a plaque at Bramall Lane. It's a little bit inconspicuous, but it's on Cherry Street.
Yes,
and
right.
it's very near the car park entrance on Cherry Street. There's a little plaque there commemorating it.
That's all it is. Yeah. Yeah. But even then, he was clever then, because the tournament started at the end of January, which always strikes me as a bit, why would you start a football team at the end of January? Which seems a bit, you'd think summertime should be better than, but anyway, he knew what he was doing. And he arranged that the final be played on Shrove Tuesday. Shrove Tuesday in the late 1800s was a huge day, and mainly nobody was at work.
Really?
He knew that. Yeah. So he knew how many people were going to turn up and pay the threats.
Yeah. And actually, I read that the crowd was about 2,000, which doesn't seem like a lot these days.
Yeah, I think between 2,000 and 3,000. I think I've seen 3,000.
At Bramall Lane, yeah. But considering that football was new, I mean, the Sheffield FC, the first football club in the world, was only formed 10 years before that trophy was fought for. So it's going to take a while.
And if you think, a lot of people have asked why, the 12 teams that were there, and obviously Sheffield being the founding team, the first club in the world, obviously, why didn't they play? And if you kind of have to look back and read between the lines a little bit, so Sheffield would be quite elite then. Sheffield FC would be a fairly elite club. So it was kind of something that they would be involved with, but not in. So they would put their auspices over it, if you like. And of course, a lot of it, and the games that were played then, were to test out the rules as well, because the rules were in their infancy, the Sheffield and the London rules. So I've read both, that the game was played under Sheffield rules, but I've read recently as well that because of a couple of decisions that were made, there were there were London rules. So perhaps it was a mixture of both, and they were kind of finding out, I think, what worked best. Because the two never sat very well together, the London and Sheffield things, obviously. But you look back at, for somebody like him, coming from his background, to work out something, and that was one of many things that he did, Thomas Youdan, that, that must have been some character to produce that kind of foresight. And not only did he do that, he had a society for football injuries. Then in 1867, 70 kind of thing. Who would have thought about that? So he was thinking about the players. But of course, there was always the other thing in his mind is, I can make a few bob kind of thing.
Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
He was an entertainment impresario.
Huge, yeah.
And so that final was against Norfolk. You mentioned the rules, and they were still evolving at the time. But I gather they were 90-minute games, which is the same as now. Am I right?
Yes. So the final was 90 minutes.
Yeah.
It was 0-0 at full time, so an hour extra time. That's what it was, an hour. No goals were scored. There were only actually 3 goals scored in the whole tournament. That's how, because if you remember, the game then was fairly tribal. It wasn't very gentlemanly.
You mean it's not tribal now?
Oh, yeah, you've been to Sandygate, haven't you?
Yeah.
Of course, forget that, yeah. So, it was a tough game. So, and you have to remember that, substitutes and, the guy on the touchline, he'd have the cold sponge, wouldn't he? And that'd be if that didn't get you up, then you were injured, kind of thing, weren't it?
People wouldn't stay down in those days. I'm sure.
But no. So they went to extra time for an hour, and Hallam won by 2
Rouges, yes.
If you know what they are.
I've read. I've seen Uriah Rennie referee a ceremonial match under these old rules, but I forget exactly what a rouge is. Tell me. Remind me.
The old goals would be similar to a rugby goal, so you'd score over and in the goal, but either side would be a flag, a red flag, a rouge.
Yes.
And you would score a rouge by touching the ball down behind the goal. Can I read a little bit of the...
Yeah.
So this was at the end of the game of how the goal was scored, or the rouges. That's a little picture. I don't know if you can show that's Thomas Youdan there with his big stovepipe hat on.
Okay. And then you've got a passage referring to the way that those rouges were scored. There were
if I can find
2 umpires and 1 referee.
That's right.
I read. By the way, can you imagine that? There's enough confusion now with a single referee. Can you imagine the confusion? 2 umpires and 1 referee. Mind you, maybe it was better. I don't know.
So that's what we did on the day. If you remember, when Uriah refereed the game, which was an oval pitch.
Yes.
Then. So there was the umpire. Sorry, the 2 umpires and the referee, and the umpires had a flag.
Yeah.
So they would flag and look to the umpire to give it no, whatever. But no, the little passage states that I think it's Mr. by the way, rounded 3 of the opposing players and touchdown behind the goal for a wonderful rouge.
Right.
Twice.
That's rugby league.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
So it was a combination of everything, wasn't it? Kicking, throwing, you name it.
Well, you could kick the ball out of your hands.
It sounds like Australian rules more than anything.
I think that was very, very close, to be fair.
Yeah.
But it was that was one of the main reasons that the rules had to come into play.
Yeah.
Because it was far too open-ended, I suppose, really. And if you look at the things that we came up with here, then the Sheffield rules, Richard, the Sheffield chairman, will tell you more about it than I can, but stuff like, like the 90 minutes, throw-ins, changing ends, substitutes, crossbar, floodlights, it's unending, the things that we came up with to make the game what it is now. So obviously the game goes back to, they've got the Chinese monks in 1100 and whatever playing. It was played in the Vatican in the 1400s. So it wasn't born here, but it was developed here into what it is now. Yeah. I mean, there are older football tournaments, but not played for as a cup.
Yes.
So it was football games went along, but this was the first actual tournament played as a cup, like the World Cup or the European Cup. But
there were 12 teams competing, apparently.
Yes. Yeah.
In that. Do you have a list of those?
I certainly do, yeah. And I tell you what's interesting as well. Yeah. So, the original 12 teams that played for the trophy were Norton, United Mechanics.
Who were they and where were they?
Absolutely. In somebody Sheffield. Will know. Somebody will know, perhaps, if they might get in touch. Mackenzie played at Myrtle Road.
Okay, right.
So that's not too far away. Garrick played at East Bank.
There was a theatre, Garrick Theatre, wasn't
The
there?
Garrick Theatre, yeah. Hallam, obviously, at Sandygate. Healy played at Wellsbrook Park, which that's...
Some people refer to Sheffield United as Healy now, don't they?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And they refer to Wednesday as South Barnsley.
South Barnsley.
That amuses me, actually. South
Yeah.
Barnsley against Healy, yeah. Good.
You've got Norfolk, who played at Norfolk Park. Furvale played at Pittsmoor. Broomhall on Ecclesall Road. Pittsmoor at Pittsmoor. So, I mean, look at that. 2 teams, Furvale and Pittsmoor, next to each other, of the original 12 teams. Wellington at Hounsfield Park. I have no idea where that is. And Milton at South Healy. So they were the original 12 teams.
Yeah, and competition would have been fierce. A lot of local pride, and you know, to get their hands on that trophy obviously meant a lot. And you know how it shaped the history of your football club as well. That you have that in your possession is quite something.
Yeah, I think Sandygate. You know, we've just had this little discussion beforehand, and with Sandygate is a special place. Not just the football. The Hallam Chase is still run. That's the oldest fell race in the world.
Oh, it's a crippler.
Still run today.
I run, but I won't do that one.
No.
Yeah.
No. And people in the football team, you know, I think Charles Shaw ran in it, and I think one of the things that you need to sort of get your head around then is the huge difference in class structure. So the gentleman players, you know, obviously Hallam Cricket Club was 1804, way before we were the oldest club in Yorkshire, not the world, but Yorkshire. Gentlemen players, look at where our ground is, you know, and that was it was in the countryside, hence called the Countryman. But even the Hallam Chase, you know, lots of military people. A lot of the early players came from down at Encliffe Hall, the local militia. There were players. It was anything to get out. It was a day out. You know, it took you half the day to get to Sandygate in those days.
It's a way out of the city, isn't it? And it's uphill as well.
Well, that's obviously why the pub's there. It's an old coaching
We'll
place,
come to that in a minute, because that is an absolute tragedy. But we'll come to that in a minute. But before we do, the trophy was lost and found at one point. So that's not going to happen today, by the way.
No,
definitely
not
not.
these security guys. So it went missing. I've not been able to discover what year it went missing, but it was missing a long time. I mean, I'm talking. Well, it was found again in 1977 in an antique shop in Scotland, Perth, I believe. The guy saw the Hallam name, got in touch with the club, and it was bought back.
For how much?
I think it was £1,600.
That's a good deal.
1977. Wouldn't be a small amount.
No,
would
but
it? Yeah.
Considering what it's worth now.
Yeah, I think a local business person helped the club out to get it back.
And how long had it been missing before that? Then?
A long time.
Was it stolen or what?
No idea. No, and why would it end up in Perth or in Scotland of all places? I think.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure if it was Perth, but
how do you authenticate something that's been missing for so long, and what's the process there?
Well, obviously, if you know, once you look at it closely, you know, and the engraving and everything, it was obviously that's what it was. There wasn't going to be 2 of them. So the actual story for the cup itself was that there was a design by the Martin and Hall. So Ebenezer Hall designed this trophy.
Let's have a closer look. So where are we referring to the unique pattern or design?
So
there?
the plaque that says Hallam FC.
There.
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah. Well, it's the one on the side there. Yeah.
And on that side, what there?
Yeah.
Are we? So these are distinctive, unique patterns and designs, right?
So this was actually one of 5 that were on the shelf, because the actual cup that was designed by Martin and Hall wasn't ready for the final.
Okay.
So he bought one just from the 5. I think we've located another 2, or our historian chap has. And obviously the one of 5 that were just on the shelf. at Martin and Hull. And then it was obviously engraved for the final.
Yes.
But as a claret jug, it's the same as the opener trophy, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but to think it's all those years old and where it's been, and there you are.
Silver plated. I won't go into any more detail than that because I don't know much about
No,
that.
no, me. I'm not an expert in that kind of stuff, but it's amazing it's still there to me.
Yeah, it does. And as we wrap up the show, we've got 4 minutes left. I've got to ask you about the plough because it's so sad. Every time I go to Hallam, which is quite a few times because I really, really enjoy watching football there, I look at that sad, dilapidated, historic pub with all the windows smashed in and boarded up. And
it's gone now, Alan.
And it's
gone.
Has it actually been?
It's gone, yeah.
So I've been to I've been in Australia at my daughter's wedding. It's flattened, is it? Have they demolished it?
Yes. Yeah, it's gone.
Wow.
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah, it's literally flat. It's gone. The aspect from the pitch is really, really strange. To stand in the middle of the pitch now and look behind that goal, it's a lighter like you've never known. It's so much lighter. But to look behind the goal and not see it there, And
how do we account in Sheffield for letting history like that just get demolished when the potential was surely there for a football museum? Had the council got behind such an idea, why did not an entrepreneur come along and see the potential for it? Or
well, let's be right. If there was going to be a football museum, that was it. That was the place for it. And it was an absolute travesty that we let Manchester pull that out from underneath us. Like you say, it's gone now. We did have a couple of people get in touch and say they wanted to create something there, but it never came to anything. But yeah, the history of both clubs, by the way, cricket and football, were born there. So, the original landlord let them use the field. It was a farmer. And, I think there's 3 original buildings because part of it was still the original building. But yeah, it's a shame, isn't it?
Well, next time I come to Hallam, I shall notice that
you will.
Very sad difference. And I hadn't realised. I'd realised the fight had been lost to preserve it, but I hadn't realised it had been.
Yeah, it's gone.
Demolished.
It's gone. Yeah, it's a very different view. It really is. Yeah. But I mean, you kind of, I've showed you the old photographs that we've got, and nearly every old photograph in the club has the waiter from the pub in it, with the cloth over his arm, and it was the boy that looked after everybody. And, that went through 2 world wars. The pub that's just gone was built into war, built between the wars. So as a lot of buildings that were built between the wars, they weren't brilliantly built because of various reasons. Not always architecturally beautiful, but had its place. But to just sort of look back and I see it when I pull up outside and I see him trotting across the road or track, wouldn't even be in a road then.
No. Because it would have been very rural then.
Oh, absolutely it was, yeah. So sort of ghosts of the past's.
I'm sure there are plenty of ghosts around Sandygate. Well, the history is so great. And
I think we want 1 or 2 playing for us, to be fair.
You're doing all right on the field, actually, aren't you? In a higher division this season, you've had
in the Premier League now. It was kind of that brought my tenure to an end. When Craig and the on and off teams came together. I think we really started moving off the pitch. We needed to get the product on the pitch right. You just said yourself about the atmosphere and kind of how much people enjoy coming along. We can only just keep going now, but yeah, we're doing all right.
Ah, brilliant. And you'll retain the trophy, whatever. Anybody who's got any item to value or is fascinated in football history, go along to Hallam this Friday, tomorrow at 5 p.m. in the 1860 bar, when, among other things, I suspect right at the end of proceedings, this beauty, the historic first football trophy, the oldest football cup competition trophy, will be valued. And it might even be valued at £1 million.
Who knows?
You never know.
Who knows? Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for bringing that in.
Thank you for the
safely
opportunity.
put it down. Steve Basford, you know, we're not going to value you, but we value your presence here at the
I'm
studio.
nearly as old.
See, it's on YouTube later. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alan.